Everyone, we're going to have a voice acting panel, correct? And in front of you are veterans of the voice acting community. We've got Ivan Sherry, who has done Inspector Gadget. You've heard him on television, you've seen him, you know. Well, not him, but you've heard him. Someone else.
It's a cartoon, Steve.
I was going to say, because you don't look like that. Artemis the Cat, Morph from X-Men. Dr. Bad Vibes, my favorite. Ron Rubin.
Hi.
From Mass Effect.
Please say that.
We have Mark Meer.
Hello, good to see everyone. You should know that over 10,000 people applied to see this panel, and you're lucky.
You are six, so the lucky winner. So
feel very fortunate.
Come.
That's right, we've got like even room you can put your feet up. I mean, you can't have that in cinemas, but you can have it here.
Stretch out, lie down.
That's right, yeah. No snoring now.
It's a great voice actor to audience member ratio.
It is. Almost as many.
One of us for every two of you.
Exactly. So I kind of specialize in cartoons, animation, and these gentlemen specialize more in the gaming aspect of it. So we'll just have a nice casual Q&A or whatever, anything you want to know about animation, cartoons, gaming, voice acting, etc., etc.
What is the difference between the two? There really
You
is.
can be first. Go ahead.
What is the difference between the two? It's like animation and then gaming.
Okay, I'll just touch on animation for a second. I'll leave the gaming to these guys because there's. I'll leave it to you. With animation, original animation, everything you see on Disney and Pixar and Family Guy, Simpsons, you lay down the voice track first, and then they draw to you. When I do dubbing, or ADR, which is additional dialogue recording, say Sailor Moon is a Japanese project, or when cartoons come in from Russia or Israel or China, and they're already drawn, you have to dub in the words to match the mouth movements. And so you're watching it on screen, and someone has painstakingly phonetically spelled out all the words. It's called the rhythmogram system, and you just follow along and you read, which makes the performance really crappy because basically you're just reading. But for all original cartoons and movies, the voice track is laid down, and you deal with a voice director. And some in the old days, you used to do it in ensemble. We used to do the entire. When I was doing Cops or Police Academy or whatever, we had to do you have like all 14 actors there, and it makes it a lot more fun because you can play off the other actors. But these days, for the sake of time and finances and expediency, they just kind of usually bring you in one at a time, or if it's a two-hander, they'll bring you in two at a time. But that's how cartoons are done. And when it comes to gaming, there's a few different options. I'll give guys take it.
I'd say one of the biggest differences, at least in the game that I've worked on, is that unlike animation, you generally will not get the script ahead of time because they're very secretive in video games about content and things like that. So a lot of the time, you're basically getting your script when you arrive for your session. And BioWare used a proprietary system called VADER. The acronym actually is VADER. But they could not get the rights to the name Vader, oddly enough. So they called it Veda instead. And that's a system where the other actors' lines will basically fire in your headset as you're doing the scene, and you're using a screen usually as opposed to paper. So you're seeing the scene go through, and you're hearing everybody else's performances, everyone that's already recorded, in your headset, and so you're able to act off of their recorded performance. Again, like the ideal situation is to have everybody in the room and that sort of thing, but especially with the BioWare games, they've got a cast that's spread out over several countries, and trying to get everybody together is just impossible. So depending on who records first, if, for example, I laid down the first vocals in a given scene, everybody else would be reacting to me. We had a unique situation in Mass Effect because, of course, Jennifer Hale was playing the female Commander Shepard, I was playing the male Commander Shepard, and they had to make sure that not necessarily that our performances matched each other, but that we took exactly the same amount of time to say a line, and that we didn't transpose the order of words. We had to say exactly the same thing. So we were fortunate enough that we often had the BioWare writers in the room. So we could just say, this line's a bit of a mouthful to say like this, can we say it this way? And they could just instantly approve it. But then they had to be very careful and track everything that either Jennifer changed or I changed to make sure the other one was doing the same thing.
Now, are you recording this in a studio? Because maybe I
Yes.
can explain motion capture, but for where you're...
I was a studio, and someone else did all the motion capture. They had actual military guys actually come in and do a lot of the motion capture.
Maybe you can explain what that's all about.
Well, it's interesting too to talk about the differences between the voiceover styles in animation and video games, because they are very, very different skill sets, and the technique's quite different. Where animation tends to have greater dynamics. We're always hearing auditions, so we need highs and lows in the performance. So if somebody says, wow, there's a rainbow, they're never going to say, wow, there's a rainbow. It's going to be, wow, there's a rainbow! Or whatever it may be, right? Because cartoons are bigger than life. Video games these days are kind of the opposite. It's, you know, we don't want those dynamics in video game voice work. It has to be incredibly realistic. Hyper-real is a term that we use quite a lot. So, you know, when you get to those over-the-top performances, cartoony performances, they don't fly in video games these days. It's quite fascinating. If you go on YouTube and you check out, just type in 10 worst voice acting performance video games, and the same company, I think it's a Toronto-based company, put this together, they have the 10 best. But to see the difference in video game voiceover performances from 15, 20 years ago to today, now I guarantee they're taking the worst of them from 15, 20 years ago, but it really is quite something. Because these days, the games these days are incredibly hyper-real. If you look at a game like Assassin's Creed Odyssey that came out yesterday, it's like watching a movie. The intent is that real. Whereas cartoons, it's very, very different. With performance capture, which is something I love to do because it's kind of like being 5 years old and playing in the sandbox as a kid. You know, if you go to the park and if you're on the moon, and when you're 5, you're actually on the moon, and that picnic table is a lunar lander, and the sand pit's a crater, and it really is for a child. And as we get older, we get away from that, right? As we get stuck in real life and important things. But performance capture is a beautiful way to get back to being a child again, and really creating a performance, because you have your script, but there's no set as such. There might be some 2x4s and things knocked up to resemble the bridge of the spaceship or whatever it may be. There's no costume because you're wearing essentially spandex pajamas with little balls on them for the cameras to capture you. There's nothing representing really much beyond those 2x4s or whatever. Your weapons will be pool noodles and things, right? So you really have the sense of playing. And you're doing it in the round as well, because it's kind of like working in theater in the round in a sense, because you've got 80 to 100 cameras all around the playing area, around the stage as it were, and that are capturing you at 160 frames a second from every conceivable angle. So it's really quite something. You really have to immerse yourself in that world, because that data is then given to the animators to animate. And once you learn how to give animators good material, good data with which to work, it makes their job a lot easier. So it's a very, very collaborative. As is voiceover, if you have the luxury of working ensemble with the rest of your cast, can be a very collaborative experience. But it can also be a very, very lonely experience when you're in the booth on your own. If you're playing Commander Shepard and you're doing thousands and thousands of lines, you're in there behind the glass on your own. It's always hot in the booth. It doesn't matter what it's like outside. You're always sweating. And then there's a big sheet of glass between you and the people making all the decisions. And when they talk amongst themselves, generally speaking, you can't hear them. They turn off so you can't hear. So you give your performance, and then you hear, okay, I'll be right back with you. And then they go into these conversations and they're shaking their head. And they're like, oh, that's never good. And we always think about, oh my God, it's terrible. I'm the worst voice actor ever. I'm going to get fired. They're probably talking about lunch, what they're going to order for lunch.
Do they ever come back and say, can you do that better?
Yes, but they usually have different ways of saying it.
Okay.
Actually, it's funny you say that, because they say, yeah, can you slow it down, put more of a smile? And I usually say, you mean you just want me to act better? Yeah, just to touch on that, I'm sorry, were you?
Oh, I was just going to do a joke of like, do that line again, but not crabby this time.
Yeah, no, exactly. See, we can take that one question and go for the next hour, but I'll just, I've been touched upon something very important that's happening in the animation world and the commercial world too, and that's people are after more real reads these days. The scope of cartoons from like the old days of Hanna-Barbera, I know I shouldn't have told you left it out, but Bugs Bunny, those kind of big cartoons. In the 80s, they wanted kind of big and goofy and cartoon and crazy voices, and then with a lot of Marvel and DC comics, X-Men, Avengers, Sailor Moon, not Sailor Moon, Silver Surfer, Diabolique. They wanted more authentic voices, and they're bringing a lot of actors from Stratford to play these kind of big dramatic roles. And now it's kind of a combination that they kind of don't want it like a lot of the breakdown for cartoons is not too cartoony, So.
But it's a cartoon.
But yeah, I know exactly, not too cartoony. I know it's a drama.
But and it also depends on the audience too, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, when I get a breakdown, if it's for preschool, I know my mindset is in a certain way. It can't be too scary, but you can be big and funny and goofy. If it's for prime time, you can get away with a little more stuff. So the demographics kind of dictate and direct you, what direction to go in. But a lot of people are saying not too cartoony, make it more real. So there's a lot of shows, 16 Dating Guy, Ridiculous Race that they're using. I teach animation, and so I work on accents and big over-the-top voices, but I also take every student, and let's take your normal tonality, let's take your normal voice, and maybe make it a little dirtier, a little geeky like this, or kind of add a little gravel like this, or kind of make it a little quirky best friend, or a sexy little valley girl, but use your own tonality, and that's kind of what they're after these days too.
Can I hear your sexy valley girl?
Oh my
Second
God.
that.
Second that, okay. Anyway, yeah.
Okay, so I guess the question is for all three of you, because what was your audition process like for Inspector Gadget and Artemis, and for you in the video games? Like, how did you, or like maybe like, what did they ask you during the interview to prove that you know what you were doing, doing?
Well, let's see. I mean, my initial work with BioWare, I basically did one sort of cattle call audition back in the late 90s for a single line in the final cutscene of the game. And they just kept, inviting me back and having me do work. And they were working on a lot of the Dungeons & Dragons-based games at that point, which meant, as a Dungeons & Dragons player, I had an advantage because they didn't have to explain anything to me. So they could just put me in the booth and say, "This is a kobold," and I wouldn't go, "What's a kobold?" I'd know exactly what was going on. So when Mass Effect first started, I was actually doing some work on hello everybody, come on in.
Come up to the front, there's not many.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
Plenty of room, just for you guys, VIP.
Come on. We're all friends. When Mass Effect first started, this was at the concept art stage, before any real casting had been done. I was called in to create basically how the alien races would sound. Like, what does a base Krogan sound like? What does a baseline Solarian sound like? And do a presentation to the writers and whatnot on that. So I figured I was just going to be playing a bunch of aliens in the game, if I was lucky enough. But during that process, I was asked to audition for Commander Shepard. So I did not think I would get it. And it kept doing callbacks and things like that while I was doing alien stuff. Was eventually told that it was down to me and two guys from LA. And it was like, well, one of them will get it, I'll be a bunch of aliens. And then I was told, no, you got it, you're Commander Shepard, and a bunch of aliens. So yeah, it all worked out.
Do you know who the two guys in the
I have no, they never actually told
really?
me.
No.
Just like, I like to think it was Nolan North.
Yeah, and Roger Craig Smith or something,
Yeah,
right?
Steve Bloom maybe. Yeah.
Sure.
Although Steve actually, he did end up being in the games. He was Grunt in Mass Effect 2 and 3.
Yeah, he's all right.
Yeah, that's Steve Bloom, the most prolific voice actor in Grunt.
Yeah, 400 video games.
Auditioning for cartoons, they send out a breakdown, and they'll say, we want to hear, a New York or a Joe Pesci voice or whatever the case. So I know the other 50 guys in the waiting room are kind of going to be, hey, come on, you freaking line. They're going to be doing kind of a similar voice. So I like to give them what they ask for, but I always do an alt. I always do a secondary take and do something completely out of the box. If it's a tiny little itsy bitsy mouth, I might kind of do it very big and over the top because I know no one else is doing that. So, but for Artemis, it was kind of my own voice, which is the hardest voice for me to do. I mean, I love hiding behind a character and committing to a character. Like, once I have the hook on a voice, then I can just stay there. And when I have to be myself, I had to lead in Police Academy, the Lieutenant Mahoney part, and so for 100 episodes I had to just be me, and it was the hardest part for me to do because I couldn't get a signature on myself. Artemis was interesting because I just used my own voice, and then I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember the TV show with Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd. It was called Moonlighting. Remember Moonlighting?
I certainly remember.
Okay.
I'm certainly old enough.
I'm not old enough to remember that.
The origins of that. So they wanted me to...
Bruce Willis had hair then.
Yes, Sybil Shepherd, I would say. They wanted me to kind of be the Bruce Willis, smart guy, laid-back guy, because as you know, in Sailor Moon, there's just so much hysteria and craziness. So, hey, get off my back. So I kind of, I wasn't doing a Bruce Willis per se, but I was kind of just like a laid-back kind of dude, that sort of thing. So that was my direction. And I don't know who else auditioned for it, to be honest with you. It was a weird casting process, but I just didn't and got it. But yeah, so I did a pseudo Bruce Willis for that.
The process is often very interesting. When I originally was called in to audition for the new Inspector Gadget series, I wasn't asked to audition for Inspector Gadget. I was asked to audition for Chief Quimby and Dr. Claw, and I called my agent and I said, Rachel, you've got to get me in to read for Inspector Gadget. And she said, well, I submitted you for that, but they don't want to see you for that. They want to see you for these other 2 roles. I said, no, I understand that, but you've got to get me in to audition for Inspector Gadget. Can you at least give me we call them the sides, right? The lines that you audition with. So I said, can you at least give me the sides so I can prepare, and I'll see if they'll let me do it at the audition. So they can't give you the sides because it's a top secret thing, and they didn't ask you for that. I'm like, oh, you're my agent. Who's signing you on, right? So I did something you're never supposed to do. We're always trained you never contact casting. There's always your agent between the actor and the casting people, always. So I got contacted casting people.
Who was casting?
Dayton Walters. Okay. So I emailed and I said, hi guys, and then I had a good relationship with them. And I said, you know I never do this, but I would love to audition for Gadget when I'm in a couple of days' time. And I didn't hear back from them. So I thought, okay, well now what am I going to do? In the meantime, my agent had a change of heart, sent me the sides for the audition. He said, don't tell anybody about this. So I got down to the audition. I went in the waiting room, I got called in, and Michael Walters, one of the casting people, said, oh, hey, Ivan, how are you? Good, good, good. Oh, and you wanted to read for Inspector Gadget too, right? Yeah, that's fine. And it was great. So I went in, and luckily it had worked out that my agent had relented on her own, cheating on the rules and giving me the part, so I could actually prepare for it. And I went in and auditioned for all 3 characters, and then I got a call. It was a good 2 or 3 months later that I got a call that I booked the part. So it was very fortunate. But it's interesting too, sometimes, there's a couple of years ago I auditioned for the character Dracula in the Hotel Transylvania animated series. And they wanted a sound-alike for the Adam Sandler Dracula from the movies. And I auditioned and didn't get it, and that was that. And they started recording the first season, and then about this spring, I got a call to come in and audition for the Dracula part in Hotel Transylvania, season 2. And for some reason, they wanted to replace the actor that got it for season 1, and they called in the actors that had made it down to the last few cuts for the first time around. And so I ended up booking that role. But it's interesting that you never know how this business is going to go. Like, it's an insane business, and things fall in your lap sometimes or come to you in the most roundabout, non-traditional ways. And we're trained to you can't wait for the phone to ring. We're trained to leave an audition and forget about it, because otherwise you'll just do your head and just thinking and worrying and hoping and praying that something's going to happen. But then you never know when it's going to come back around to you, and then just kind of go, hey, here's something for you, there you go.
Yeah, early in my career, I used to leave an audition and it would just be, oh my God, am I going to get, it used to be just weighing so heavy on my mind. And these days, over the last 30 years, it's been, I go in, I do the best, and I walk out, and I just leave it. And, all the friends will say, what'd you do? I was at, what'd you audition for? And I won't even remember, because you just go in and do your best and let it go. Although if you get a call back and you're close, that's when it starts kind of...
It's a little harder to let go of the ones when you're close.
Exactly.
Were these original career choices? What were you, like, I got 2 young guys beside me here, what were you thinking at 18? What were you going to do with your life?
Good
and now look where you are. I consider you all successful people.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
I certainly did not foresee a career in acting, because I didn't even take drama in high school. I went to school in a very small town that had no drama program. It was either academics or sports. I went academics. I was enrolled in science at the university when I moved to the big city of Edmonton, and basically I fell into this. And again, people often ask, so how do you become a voice actor? It's like, well, first you become an actor. First you're an actor, and you're an actor who goes to voice auditions. And when you are a working actor, when you don't have another job besides that, you'll audition for all sorts of things, and you might not necessarily. I know of very few actors who go, I'm going to just be a voice actor and that's all I'm going to do. Like, you're going to do radio, you're going to do commercials, you're going to do like, you know, the little independent films. And again, the voice acting audition, when it came along, of course, I was like, yeah, I love video games, I'd love to be in one. But it was never one that I set out to, like, I'm going to do voices in video games, and that's what my career path will be. So, yeah, be ready to roll with the punches, I guess, would be my advice.
Yeah, I mean, I came from a family of doctors and lawyers, and then I was letting you know.
Me too.
Did you really?
Oddly, yeah, all my cousins are all
Oh,
doctors.
yeah, doctors and lawyers and everything.
And you guys make cartoons.
Yeah, much more important.
So it supported my dad that I go to university, so I got a degree in psychology and economics or whatever the case. And then I knew I wanted to do something in the creative field, so I moved to Toronto from Winnipeg originally. Actually, it was funny because my dad went to school at Monty Hall. Remember Monty Hall? Let's make a deal.
Let's make a deal.
And like that was his
Of course, because he was in Winnipeg.
That was
right?
his one connection. Yeah, I went to St. John's Tech. That was his one connection. He phoned Monty and he said, "Listen, Monty, he tracked me down in LA. This was at the height in the '80s. That like Monty was as big as anyone." He said, "My son wants to go into the entertainment field. Any advice?" And Monty said something that made no sense to me back then, but now I understand. He said, "Tell your son to get away from in front of the camera and go behind the scenes." He said, "A writer, a producer, a director, there's more longevity in that, but yeah, I want to be in front of the camera." So I got my degree and I went to Toronto and I started with Second City and doing improv, and then I did stand-up, which was a great showcase for me because they did a lot of voices and sound effects and everything in my stand-up. And then, like every comedian, I wanted to be a dramatic actor, so I moved to New York and I studied at the Neighborhood Playhouse, did a lot of theater, and then I did the LA thing and film and TV and all the stand-up shows and everything like that. And then mid-'80s, I think one of my first cartoons, Tim Burton hired me to do Beetlejuice, to do a bunch of parts in the Beetlejuice cartoon, and I just fell in love with the genre. I was like, really? I can go into the studio in a pair of cutouts and baseball cap and do this? And one thing just led to another. But I didn't necessarily start off wanting to be voice acting doing cartoons, although it's always been something I have done. When I was going to university, I had my own comedy troupe, and I was writing and voicing shows for CBC, nationally radio, and so half of me was in the creative writing, voicing arena, and half of me was playing, about a third of me was playing sports, and a third of me was kind of doing scholastics and working at group homes, counseling kids, and so, I don't know, I was going in all sorts of different directions, but I knew I kind of had something inside of me that I wanted to, that I wanted to let out, and it turned out to be this.
Yeah, it's interesting too, in Canada, we for the most part, we have no choice but to have as many strings in our bow as possible. You know, it's hard to just do one aspect of it here and make a living. There just isn't the amount of work that there is in LA, for instance. And a lot of the stuff, especially film and television wise, that happens certainly in Toronto and Vancouver, is what we call service work, where it's an American production, they locate up here, they can take advantage of the tax credits, they hire Canadian crews, which are great. Canadian crews have a great reputation. So they take advantage of our tax credits. We take advantage, but they use the tax credits we offer to bring that work here. You know, certainly now they're getting 30 cents on the dollar. There's tons of American work, but the cast-wise for actors, they also bring up a lot of American actors to play, you know, the first 8 people on the call list, all the big parts. So a lot of us are, you know, are day players. And these days, when it comes to, you know, television and film in particular, you know, whereas if you got a small part in a TV show, you might get 2 or 3 days out of it. Whereas these days they're finding ways to cut costs and to block shooting 2 episodes at the same time to save money. And it's happening in the UK as well. It certainly happens here. It's happening in the States to a certain degree as well. So you know, we all have to have as many, you know, they say arrows in our quiver, strings in our bow, whatever the analogy may be, in order to afford ourselves the opportunities to work as much as we can. It's interesting though how we do often label ourselves as voice actors.
That's right, yeah.
Right? I know it's not just the other people that do it, but we do it to ourselves too, right?
Yeah. Although I always consider myself an improviser who occasionally does voice work.
Yeah, well, great. Yeah.
Actually, do you have much of an improv background as well?
No. I always sort of wanted to do Second City. I just never seemed to do it for some reason.
Right.
You know, I love it. I have a great amount of admiration for improv artists, and especially the people that do stand-up, which I think is the hardest thing to do in entertainment business, is get up there on a stage on your own and deliver 8 minutes of material that you wrote yourself to a room of people that may or may not find you funny, and it's unbelievably difficult. I wish. Oh, I bet. That must be incredible.
Unbelievable. And I miss that because when you're doing theater or stand-up or Second City, you have the audience right there, so you're getting the feedback. You know, when we do a game or a cartoon or a commercial or a TV show or something, you kind of have to wait the months or the years or whatever for it to come out to get that response.
Yeah.
But no, when I was in my 20s living in New York doing stand-up, it was just, oh man,
Yeah.
I didn't even care if I...
And the improv thing, well, you don't necessarily need it, but I do think that the improv background really helps you specifically with video game voiceover, because as I mentioned, you're often just getting your script right then, so being able to get right in the character immediately and just immediately in the situation.
Well, also
Some cartoons as well.
Yes, yeah, somebody's auditioning for one part and they say, well, you're not good for this, try this part, and you're getting a script cold. You know, you haven't read it before. But if you're asking for your sons, keep them in school for a while. See, there's never any voice classes or anything when I was going to school or anything. And now there's a lot of, you can take animation classes, commercial classes, voice classes, but any community theater, any improv, any acting background, everything helps. You know, I always label commercials and TV reads as voiceovers, whereas gaming or animation as voice work, because you kind of have to have an acting background for that. So yeah.
But I would highly recommend improv too, not just for acting, for entertainment, but just for life.
Yeah.
Improvisation is an amazing skill to have and to develop and to learn, and to feel comfortable getting up in front of people and not being afraid to fall on your face is incredible. You know, public speaking is the #1 fear people have, more so than death, which is mind-boggling, right? It's like Jerry Seinfeld has that line about, if that's the case, then you'd rather be the guy in the casket than the guy delivering the eulogy, right? So improvisation, absolutely. No matter if you want to be an actor or not, learning improv, doing some improv will do you wonders for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
When you're voicing a legacy character, do you like watch or listen to previous incarnations just to?
It's a good question, because we often say to people, the things we hear as voice actors are often, I want to be a voice actor. Here's my Homer Simpson.
Yeah.
It's like, well, but that job's already taken.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody's already doing that job. That's not going to help you. What you need to do is to be able to develop flexibility and a limitless array with your own voice to come up with new things. And then I think, oh, wait a minute, hang on then. I play Inspector Gadget. Okay, never mind what I just said. And Dracula, in Hotel Transylvania. Okay, well, so there's always exceptions. But I think, generally speaking, they'll let you know, but what they want when it comes to playing a character that has already been played by somebody else, usually you have to carry on certainly some kind of vocal tradition with that character. Inspector Gadget couldn't have any other voice other than, something akin to what Don Adams created between 1983 and 1986. When Maurice LaMarche took over from Don Adams, he did the same thing. When I did, we were encouraged to make it our own, but it has to live within a certain world.
Yeah, but you're talking about a reboot of a series.
Yeah, actually, like a legacy character, right? So something that's come from something else.
Legacy character, yeah. But
as opposed to being like recast.
Yeah, but for original, they want you to. I teach animation. I produce demos for animation, and a lot of people say, I do a great Homer Simpson, or I do a great. And no, they're not looking for impressions or imitations or anything like that. They want to see characters that you make your own, that they haven't heard from before. They want something to jump off the page or off the tape.
I mean, great. You can do Bugs Bunny. Great. You're never going to get that part. Like it's,
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Anything with voices, voice work, cartoons? No? Yes, sir.
Is there hope for those who just cannot sing?
Yeah, you don't have to.
Oh, yeah.
No, I just mean if you just cannot get your voice to
Yeah,
sing, does
I
that
mean,
mean
a lot
you
of
just can't control your voice enough to be an actor?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a professional singer.
Yeah, I know far too many good singers to think that I'm a good singer. So, not everything requires, you're probably not going to be in any Disney cartoons. But
Well, I think if they want, you touched on a good point. If they want a real singer, they're going to hire a real singer.
Exactly.
When if I'm asked to audition to do a Scottish voice, I can do a half-assed Scottish voice, but there's so many people who are Scottish who can do it way much better than me. I pass on all that because I know they're going to hire an actual Russian or an actual, Asian or an actual, Indian to do those voices. So find your specialty. And kind of,
And again, that kind of depends on the style of the cartoon and what the audience is. I
Yeah.
mean, like Groundskeeper Willie isn't a great Scottish accent, right? He just isn't.
Well, he's a
But he got that part. So it kind of depends on the realism of the cartoon.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah, exactly. But for video games, for instance, they're so specific about accents, and often if you're auditioning for a game that is set in the UK, for instance, they'll only see people that are actually from Britain with a British accent or have a perfect British accent. They won't take people, generally speaking, that do a pretty good British accent.
Yeah.
Because, gamers, that stuff will be in all the reviews, that stuff will be a bit of a downfall for that game. I mean, a game like Assassin's Creed Unity, which was set in the French Revolution, Ubisoft decided to have everybody in English accents. And it was an English accent from the county of Hampshire that they chose. And I'm English. And I don't know what a Hampshire accent is, because there isn't really a Hampshire accent. So it was bizarre that the voices that ended up being in that game were English, but they were not the English that they were hoping to get. And they were kind of all over the map, because there wasn't any specific thing that they actually wanted. They didn't know really what it was they wanted in the first place. And that game suffered, I think, because of it. So now they're very specific about it. For Assassin's Creed Odyssey, that just, as I think I mentioned, just shipped yesterday, it's set in ancient Greece. And when you go down the credit list on IMDb, it's tons and tons and tons of Greek actors. And they can go, these companies are big enough with budgets, when the budget for your game is $150 million, they can go wherever they want in the world to cast the actors whose voices they need. So they could be shooting the game here. Ubisoft's only 2 performance capture studios are in Toronto and Montreal. That's worldwide. They have offices all over the world. But they'll go down and do some recording in LA or in London or wherever they need to go in order to get the voices that they need.
and also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's also very true, I assume in gaming as well, as animation, before, if they wanted that, there's a lot of kid cartoons that teenagers or youngsters are having to lead. Those used to always be voiced by usually women. Women do great little boys, look at Bart and whoever, but now they're using little kids. There's a lot of very talented, if they need a 12-year-old or an 11-year-old, they're probably going to use a 12-year-old or 11-year-old to do the part, and that never used to be the case. So, yeah.
Yeah, of course, it was like Veronica. You guys know Veronica Taylor, who was Ash on
Oh, yeah.
Pokemon? Yeah. So she talks about that as well. It's like, God, this used to be a woman, this field.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting too, like 15 years ago, for instance, where there's an actor that we know who once went into a voiceover audition. They were looking for an East Indian voice. And this gentleman is not East Indian, he's I think English heritage, but Canadian. And he said he went into the waiting room, and there were 30 East Indian actors there, and him, and guess who booked it?
Really?
He booked it, right? That was years ago. Now, and even in cartoons, now if there's an African Canadian character or an Asian Canadian character for the cartoon, they are more actively trying to get the actors with that heritage to play those characters, even though they're animated. Which is good, and it's important because we need to actively represent the faces that we have in our country and around the world.
Although actually, I got cast years ago as Lucky the Leprechaun for Lucky Charms cereal. Where are you going with my magical charms? And I was just doing the worst, and I couldn't believe I got it because there was Irish actors in the crowd.
Yep.
And I said, I'm a Jew from the prairies. You're actually hiring me. Where are you going with my Lucky Charms? I did the worst racist impression.
I always thought you were magically delicious.
Magically delicious. Don't let me let
Come on down, guys.
Come on down.
Come on down front.
152. So it's
Right,
time.
we've got about 20 minutes? Yes.
I have a question, and I'm going to try to phrase it properly. What are your thoughts on platforms like Upwork, websites, I don't know if you're familiar with Upwork, which allow amateurs or professionals to submit applications for, it could be anything from writing to voiceovers. What are your thoughts on platforms like that? Is that a good place to start for somebody who is looking to, maybe do some more voice? I've done like commercials and things like that, but to do voice work, because there's a lot of
Like pay-to-play sites, you mean, like voices.com and
Well, no,
Hidalgo?
for things even like translation programs or for YouTube videos.
Yeah.
I've even seen voice work for apps, for children's apps, for audio books, all sorts of different jobs. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I wonder if there's professional actors, voice actors that are, what are their thoughts on a platform like this? Do you think that that's a good place to start, or do you think it's taking jobs away? It's more of like a cheap way to get voice work for these, companies or businesses?
Well, the landscape of voice work has completely changed over the last half a dozen years. We were just talking about this earlier. Just in a nutshell, there's Union ACTRA, the Association of
Right.
Canadian Television Radars, and if you're ACTRA, as we are, they have to pay you a certain rate, and they have to put money towards your RSP, and there's some red tape, and they have to pay you residuals, blah, blah, blah. And if you're non-union, if you're not ACTRA, you don't get those ACTRA jobs. On the other hand, there's a huge demand now for non-union, and non-union shows are proliferating the business to our detriment, But if you're not an ACTRA member and you want to start up doing voice work, then take lessons, get a demo together, and the voices.com, there's pay-per-play, places. I think it's a good opportunity, absolutely. It's kind of a catch-22, because in the old days, when students would ask me, should I become ACTRA, the answer was, of course, yes, all the big things are ACTRA. And still the big things are ACTRA today, but there's so much work non-union. And it's a bit of a
Kind of two
bit of a hassle
streams.
for, it's,
No, I wondered about that, because some of the, jobs you can tell that they don't have a big budget, right? So they're not.
Just be careful, some of those pay-for-play websites are okay, and they'll pay you okay. There's no residuals, there's no back end here, you get this amount. So we're just saying, it doesn't matter, these figures. The difference is, if you get a cartoon, a series with ACTRA, you get paid per part, per episode. Right. If you're non-union, you get paid much less, and you can do 10 episodes and 15 characters in one day, and you're still going to get the same amount.
And they're kind of taking advantage of you too, because they're selling that show for X amount of dollars, and they're giving you a pittance, and they're making all the money on the back end, and you're not getting any of it. Right? So it kind of depends where you want to, how important is it to make that $350 for the day's work, where you're doing 9 episodes. But if whereas for us, if we were doing 9 episodes, that the pay scale, everything would be significantly different. But you're not going to have access to that work if you're not in the union. So it's kind of a give and take. And companies like Voices.com in particular, there's a big stink about them, because they take a huge amount of the client's budget. So say you have a company, Dave's Coffee, and you want to do a radio ad, and you're going to put it on Voices.com, and Voices.com says, hey, how much is your budget? And they say, oh, Dave's Coffee Shop says it's going to be $2,000. Say, okay, great, we can take care of all the casting for you, do this and that and the other. So they'll post it on their website. So you pay your $400 US for your year membership. You go to your profile, you go to the jobs that are up that day. You say, oh, Dave's Coffee. Oh yeah, this one pays $300. Great. That's only going to take me an hour to do and edit and everything else. But you as the actor don't know that the budget for that job was $2,000. All you get is all you see is what you're getting paid, right? So they're taking massive amounts of money.
Sadly enough, Voices.com probably pays more than many of the other sites that pay much less than that. I mean, there's Fiverr now, here's $5 to do a voiceover. It's crazy.
But on the other hand, with these days, it's because anybody can do it now. If you have a good home studio, which you need to have, it doesn't have to be, a totally dedicated room.
Right.
They're pretty simple. There's tons of YouTube videos and stuff on how to do it well. But you need to have the ability to be able to record broadcastable quality that you edit on your own and submit to them.
But a lot of people are doing that.
Tons of people. I have a friend who's going to make $100,000 this year doing pay-to-play voice work.
Wow.
Now, she's a professional actor. She's an ACTRA member. She doesn't do anything non-union outside Canada. But, again, it's like the Airbnb or Uber of the voice world, right? So
Yeah,
you do this
you
voice
brought up a
work
good point,
for,
too.
for India and stuff. You just edit yourself, send it, and they go, that's great. Or they ask you for an edit, send it back, done. Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything's changing with all the social platforms and the YouTube and the, putting up your profile on these pay-to-play sites and just setting up a home studio. Do it and maybe use that to then get into the union.
And as mentioned, like, you don't necessarily need a room in your house. Do you guys know Dave Fennell?
Oh, yeah, Dave Fennell, yeah.
So have you seen his little traveling thing that he has?
Oh, has he got one of the little
It's like a
dome
little like foam cube that he basically,
Oh, yeah.
in a hotel room, he'll just stick his head inside it, do all his auditions or whatnot that he has to do while he's on tour. And,
I have this amazing Shure microphone that plugs into my iPhone, and the quality is insane. And you put that behind the baffle, and it's broadcast quality, and you can just put that in the back of your smartphone.
Yeah. It's easier now than it's ever been.
Yeah.
Having said that, I mean, that's when it comes to equipment and transmission, you still have to be able to be a really good actor. Because it is, even if you're voicing a 30-second radio commercial, chances are you're telling a story, right? And when you only have 30 seconds to tell that story, you know, there has to be some heart to that, or there has to be, you know, it's, as Ron mentioned earlier on, it's not like the 80s where announcers don't talk like this on spots anymore the way they used to, and we hear that all the time. You're auditioning for the announcer, but we don't want it to be announcery.
Well, it's funny because now, and yeah, I'm very clear with my students about this too, not only in gaming and animation are they kind of making more real, but especially commercial reads. It's amazing.
Yeah.
To the point that there's a few car companies out there literally across the screens as these are not real actors, or these are not actors, they're real people. So what they're looking for is what's called a non-read. And they want it to seem like you're not paying an actor to sell, you know, McDonald's or whatever. And so, you know, it used to be kind of like, you know, the come down for only $4.99, you can get these matching pillowcases at the Bay, you know, on sale till this Sunday only. And now it's like, come on down to the Bay for only $2.99. You know, they just want to make it much more casual than, yeah.
It's like you're talking to a friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
and if you do end up doing that voice, probably a parody of one of those other, well, the old style commercials.
Oh, yeah,
Comedy.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have new people here.
We do have some new people.
Get up.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining. Everyone get up and introduce yourself. We're talking about the world of voiceovers, animation, gaming. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm a Mass Effect fan, so I was just wondering, with all the choices and like going Paragon or Renegade, what was the process like with that? Would you just have to keep on doing different lines over in a different way?
For those who don't know, in Mass Effect, you basically have two. You have lots of paths you can choose, but there's sort of two styles of play. One is Paragon, which is being an upstanding hero and always doing the right thing, and one is Renegade, where you're still saving the galaxy, but you're being a bit of a jerk while you do it, and more of a dirty, hairy type. So essentially, in every scene, we work scene by scene, and we would generally do one path first, and then the other path, and there would be some lines of dialogue that were shared between the two of them, and that was actually that was a bit of a challenge for both Jennifer and myself, because there were some lines that were going to be used for both Paragon and Renegade, so you couldn't put too much pepper on it. You couldn't have the Renegade lines be like really hard and intense, because you might be going back to one of the generic lines that's shared by both paths. So we really had to, and we relied on our directors for that, just to find the sweet spot so it didn't sound like Commander Shepard was having wild mood swings. And the other thing is, like, not everyone would play strictly Paragon or strictly Renegade. Like, given the choice, they might pick, a Renegade option because they didn't like a particular character, or they were just angry about the situation. But they might be in a Paragon playthrough. So yeah, that was the interesting thing of trying to find that balance. But to answer your original question, we would generally record, like, it would depend. The director would decide, okay, so we're going to do all the Renegade lines or the Renegade run through for this scene. Now we'll record the Paragon. And we would generally do that, complete a scene, make sure all the dialogue for both paths was chosen, and then move on to the next scene.
But did you think of yourself as like two characters playing it, since you had to do it like in two different ways?
It all had to be the same character, because again, there were some players who would do sort of mix and match. So you had to always be Commander Shepard, but sometimes angry, sometimes a little more noble. And the same with the background and stuff too, because there is no canon Commander Shepard. BioWare's been very careful about that, like in all the tie-in stuff, like they won't use gendered pronouns for Shepard, they'll always say there, that kind of thing. And they'll generally try to avoid showing pictures of Shepard, because everybody's Shepard is going to look different. So that was the cool thing, like a character who, as I say, both for Jennifer and I, to play a character who is completely created by the player, who doesn't, and you can't just go, this is the definitive Commander Shepard, because everybody's Commander Shepard is their definitive Commander Shepard.
I have to play this game.
Yeah, well, it's fun.
This sounds really cool.
If you have about 120 hours to spare, have I got a trilogy for you?
What platform is it?
Xbox and PS3, and there's talk of them remastering it for the new gen. and I believe there was a PC version as well.
Okay, cool. And Assassin's Creed, what platform is that?
I don't know. I don't play games.
Okay.
I really, it's all beyond me. It really is.
I'm
Is
such
it
an
Atari? I like Atari.
I'm such an addictive personality.
I'm a television man.
I'm staying away from games, but if I got into it, I'd be lost.
Yeah, I'm afraid I
Was the
waste time.
Normandy based on the Concorde?
Sorry?
Was the Normandy based on the Concorde?
On the airplane car? I'm not actually sure, because that wasn't really, I don't know. If it is, I'm sure it's mentioned in one of the Mass Effect art books. If it's not mentioned in one of the Mass Effect art books, I would say it's probably apocryphal, because that seems like something they'd put up front.
Got a few minutes left.
Anybody else?
Anyone? Someone? Yes.
One of the things that I've noticed is that you went to a casting call, right? You went to an audition, and they got a call back 4 months later. And what's the average time span for callbacks on this?
I don't recall saying that, but.
No, I think I said when I booked Gadget, it was,
Oh, yeah.
I got the call for the booking
Yeah.
about 3 months after I'd had the call back.
The average time for callback?
In our business, no news is generally bad news.
Yeah.
If you go in for an audition and you don't hear back for a week or two, chances are, yeah.
Yeah, you can just assume you do.
Casting is generally the last thing they do, and you'd think they'd almost forgotten about it, because you'll get a note from your, you get an email or a phone call from your agent, they'll go, you got an audition tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, and here's, 78 pages, well, it's not an exaggerate, you get 10 pages of dialogue to prepare this main character in this cartoon, and it starts recording in the next week.
Yeah.
It's like, they've been planning this thing and developing it for years, and it's like, oh, we gotta cast some actors, and we're always the last minute. So usually it happens pretty quickly, except in the world of video games, where you can audition for something and not get cast for months and months and months. It could be a year, it's not unheard of to be cast a year later, because when a game takes 4 or 5 years to develop from start to finish until it ships, and when you're talking about budgets over $100 million per video game, there are lots of things that happen along the way that put production back. There's issues with scripts, there's issues with this, there's issues with that, with whatever it may be. And so the process can be derailed along the way. And so, again, that's where it comes in really handy as an actor to audition and to forget about it, because then when the phone does ring, it's like, what? Assassin's what? I don't even remember auditioning for that. Well, you auditioned for it like 15 months ago. Oh, great. Well, okay, good. They paying me? Perfect. Let's go. Right? And that's where it can be a long, long time.
Have you ever turned something down and maybe regret it because you've seen where it went?
I got offered a couple of audiobooks a couple of years ago, which isn't something we've generally had a lot of access to here in Canada. And they're a lot of work. You're in the studio on your own, generally with an engineer, or somebody's recording them at home, and you're reading this book and bringing this book to life and off the page, and there's a ton of prep work to do, which you don't get paid for. You usually don't get paid for. So obviously you got to read the book a few times. Sometimes they want different voices for all the characters, so you got to do all that prep, which you don't get paid for. And then they pay you per finished hour. So it could take you, for a newbie, it could take 3.5 hours to record and edit one finished hour of work. And you get paid per finished hour.
Really? You don't get paid for your booth then?
What's that?
You don't get paid
No,
for
per finished hour.
Wow.
Is that generally how you guys get paid per?
No.
No, that's generally not the way it works.
No.
Are there
But,
residuals?
Audiobooks are very different.
Or audiobooks are different?
I booked these 2 books, and I thought, it'll be an experience, and, I may never do one again, but that's cool. And one of them took place in Prince Edward County, and my Canadian hometown is Kingston, so it's close to home. Anyway, so I was getting this passage in the book, and there was, some somewhat graphic material in the book, and I said, oh, okay, whatever, yeah, okay, and I thought, hang on a minute. I'm the voice of a beloved children's cartoon character. I can't possibly be reading this stuff. Like, it's got to be in contravention somehow of the contract, right? Because you can't do anything that brings any kind of, yeah, exactly, against the franchise. So I had to turn that down. So I had to turn it down. But did I regret it? Not really, because I don't think audiobooks really hold an awful lot of interest for me. I just find it's too much. It's too much work for sort of too little payoff in the end.
I can't speak to gaming, but to answer your question, as a rule of commercials, and as Ivan said, I mean, you'll get the auditions Monday, it's recording Thursday, so you know damn well if you don't hear back by Tuesday or Wednesday, you're not getting it. And, you know, cartoons, they usually have a record date happening there, so although that just happened to me not too long ago, I got booked for beatboxing elephant or something, and I said, what, and when did I audition for that, Paul? To my agent, and he said last year, like, it rarely happens.
Yeah, it rarely. Usually it's video games where there's a lag time between auditioning and getting cast.
Like I said, when I was reading for, or auditioning for Commander Shepard, I was sort of like, okay, I'll do an audition, and then work on some alien stuff for a while, and then it would be like weeks later, it's like, oh yeah, you made it to the next round. Like, oh, okay, sure, I'd forgotten that was happening, but, you know.
Yeah, it's nice.
Anybody else? A beatboxing elephant? That's awesome. I just did a Rusty Rivets. I was funnily enough, I was a robotic detective. Typecast, I guess.
Yes, sir.
For residuals, do actors get residuals for like merchandise? Or if a show ends up like on iTunes?
Merchandise
That's a great
is
question.
weird.
It's a great question.
Yeah, no, not always for merchandise. That has to be kind of specifically in their contract. I've done a lot of voices for a lot of cartoons, and I've seen them in stores with. Now, if they use your actual voice in there, this is actually really complicated.
Yeah, if it's like
really
a talking toy, yeah.
If it's a talking toy and they use your voice, basically they have control over the merchandising and the back end of it. So I don't know, I think that's kind of specific in each case. I have been paid for some and others not at all.
I think what they tend to do more so now, because it's all about these companies, you know, it's all about the bottom line, right? Like in every other industry is getting squeezed as well. And what they often will do is they'll hire non-union actors to do the voices, like to try and do a voice match for all the merch.
And sometimes actually, like if it's like a video game tie into a movie or something, they'll have sound-alikes come in to play, say, Iron Man or whatnot. Right. Because Robert Downey Jr. probably isn't going to do the video.
Or he's certainly not going to do it for the rate that
Not for the
somebody
rate,
else
yeah.
who can do his voice is going to do. The
Okay,
other thing too is that with cartoons is that, sorry, go ahead. Mark.
I was just in the merchandise thing. I do know that on occasion, especially now that like there's some video games that actually use the likeness of people, and in Commander Shepard's case, there is a real guy who looks like the default Commander Shepard. He's a Dutch model named Mark Vanderloo. I don't think he got, even though like all the action figures and things like that were using his likeness, I believe he just got a buyout right at the top. And again, he was just he didn't even do the mocap, he was just like the face model. So I think that was just part of his contract.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see a lot of Artemis toys around the con or morph action figures or whatever. No, I don't see a penny of that. Yeah.
But you know, the licensing and merchandising is such a big deal. I mean, everyone knows Paw Patrol, right? Because we see it everywhere.
Yeah.
But there are cartoon series now that have been created solely to sell the merchandise. So essentially, really, the industry is the merchandise. And the cartoon is just there to advertise the merchandise.
Oh man, that's so
Like
true.
Commander She-Ra.
Well, yeah, so that goes back to when they changed the rules, and then you saw like Masters of the Universe and Care Bears and Rainbow Bright and all these, and you know, Strawberry Shortcake, all these essentially toy lines that were using the cartoons as a big commercial. So,
Yeah, I mean, for years, it was the commercials that spawned, it was the cartoons that spawned the toys, and now they're creating a toy, let's spawn a cartoon. We have time for maybe one more question. Jen? Yeah. We're all going to be at our tables for the next bunch of hours. If you want to come by and say hi and maybe get an autograph or something like that. You guys have been great. This has been a lot of fun. Is there another panel?
Yeah, Lost Girls coming in.
Oh, that's why there's been an influx of people. Okay. Well, if you have any more questions.
You guys are here to see Chris, aren't you?
But you guys were fascinating.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everybody.